We'll start our second rounds of questions now with Ms. Lanceman. Please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Minister, I'm going to jump right in my questions because you've had a month to answer these questions. But you said in your opening statement, I'm going to quote you, "This is the way that the investigative and national security system should work." Your government issued a visa to somebody who was allegedly in a 2015 ISIS propaganda video, who then planned a mass casualty event outside of Toronto with a target in our city, in our country's largest city. The RCMP foiled that plot with intelligence from the French. Are you really telling Canadians that that's how our system should work? He's been here for 6 years.
Mr. Chair, what I'm saying to Canadians is that the moment the government of Canada became aware of concerning information regarding this individual, all of the appropriate steps were put in place by CSIS and the RCMP, which culminated in the arrest on the 28th of July. And thank God, as Ms. Lanceman said, the potential serious risk or violence was averted. With respect to the information regarding the immigration processing, the Immigration Department will be here later and are in a position to speak to the specific steps that an applicant, whether for asylum or permanent residency, and we're looking at the security check system.
Yeah,
the
Minister,
security
by my count, there's
system.
about 6 security checks in the documents that you dumped on this committee 50 minutes before it started. Do you really think that the system is working if somebody like this, who's an alleged ISIS terrorist, who, if he was even a little bit more productive, would have resulted in mass casualties in Toronto? Do you really think that that's how the system should work? Do you really think that this is not a colossal failure of your government?
I am very proud of the work that the RCMP and CSIS did in thwarting this particular case. I think, as Mr. Gallivan indicated, if you look at the tens and hundreds of thousands of these cases that are reviewed every year as people seek asylum, submit asylum claims, or apply for various visas, we necessarily rely on the work of our security agencies. We're always looking at ways to strengthen and evolve that posture as the threat context, as Ms. Lloyd said, evolves. But in this case, I am satisfied that when the government of Canada was aware or could possibly have been aware of this information, all of the steps were taken.
They were aware 6 years ago when he came in. And speaking of that, we heard speculation,
Ms. Glassman, you can't assert something like that if you're...
He's been here for 6 years. It's just a known fact from your own documents.
But you said to assert that people were aware of some information that came to light recently 6 years ago is wrong.
There is speculation that he was brought in under the Syrian refugee program. Is this correct, yes or no?
I'm not sure I can speculate on the particular immigration status and program, and I'm not sure what part of that might be subject to the criminal trial, but you could certainly ask the Immigration Department that question.
Do you believe that if he was brought under this, if he was brought in through this stream, the government promised increased screening on asylum seekers in this country? Do you believe that after everything we know today, that your government is doing its job on that?
But again, I don't want to give credence to the premise that you ask because I don't have that information. So I want to be very precise that you don't link his arrival to a particular immigration program. The Immigration Department, I think, can provide you with those facts. I don't have them, but I don't want, in answering your question, to appear to confirm that because I don't have that information. I am satisfied that both the security services and the RCMP with the Immigration Department have in place a series of rigorous screening and background checks that take place. You heard Ted talk about biometric screening, 6 different databases. We heard the interim director of CSIS talk about 300 agreements, 150 different countries. We have access to a great amount of information to keep Canadians safe, and we need to make sure that that information is used in the most expeditious way possible.
This person was brought into Canada 6 years before a terrorist plot was foiled, just days before they would have killed people in Toronto. And you're telling Canadians that you're satisfied with the screening processes in place.
As I said in my opening comments, this person and the nature of the allegations which ultimately led to the investigation and arrest came to our attention in June. And this person from that point on was obviously under the appropriate surveillance to ensure that any threat was mitigated and led to the ultimate arrest on the 28th of July.
How can
Thank you, Ms. Landsman. We go now to Mr. Gerritsen. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. And I just want to start by thanking the committee for voting in favor of the Liberal motion to study this, because I think it's extremely important that we do that. I do take issue, Minister, both Conservatives who have asked you questions have referred to this as a colossal failure. I think that when you look at the various different organizations that have been working together, as you indicated, some 7 or 8 organizations, this is an example of how we should be working, how our organizations and agencies should be working together to get the best results for Canadians. I take issue, or I recognize that Mr. Caputo seems to take issue with the fact that this information was given to Canada that assisted us in coming to the conclusion that we did. But the reality is that Canada is a net importer of information. And as a matter of fact, if you think of all the agencies throughout the different countries that would work together, every agency would end up being a net importer. That's the whole purpose to coming together with other countries to share information so that we can all benefit from it. That being said, can you talk a little bit about the risks, Minister, with disclosing the exact details of how CSIS may have become aware of the threat posed to us?
Mr. Gerritsen, thank you for the question. I can certainly, based on briefings I've had over the last year and a month from CSIS, offer a view, and perhaps Ms. Lloyd could add something. The reason why CSIS, or people like me who may have access to some of this information in the routine course of my job, don't confirm or identify particular sources or partner countries, as you said, that are sharing information with us, and we would, of course, share information that we gather with those same countries, is because it can, if we're confirming both the tradecraft, the way that these intelligence agencies gather information, if we confirm it's agency X and not agency Y, perhaps some of these bad threat actors will be able to identify either human sources who would be at huge risk, you can understand what that would mean, or be able to understand the tradecraft, the very sophisticated and effective way that CSIS and other agencies gather this information in order to protect Canadians. So that's why every previous government has been very prudent, and that's why the Security of Information Act also provides criminal sanctions for those that cross the line. But perhaps Vanessa can add something specific, or Mark?
Yeah, and I do actually have another question that maybe you could answer as well, Interim Director Lloyd. If I'm not mistaken, today's the 1-month anniversary since the individuals were arrested. Yeah, and I've personally never seen a chronology of events be disclosed to the public so quickly, despite the fact that I'm hearing from across the table that my colleagues are concerned about how quickly this was released. Are you aware, Interim Director, of any other cases where the details have been released so quickly to the public?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Honourable Member, it is our objective to be as transparent as we can with Canadians. Safety and security of Canadians and Canada's interests is of paramount importance to our organization as well as to our security partners that join us here today. I can also say that it is equally important, as the Minister referenced, to be very vigilant with regards to disclosure of specific facts. As the Minister referenced, this can allow for our adversaries to learn where they went wrong, and providing a roadmap to them to change their methods will have the impact of making it more difficult to detect these threats. And equally, we hope to be able to preserve the capabilities, the methodologies, and the tradecraft that the Minister referenced of our service to address those threats.
And I appreciate that, but Minister, and I appreciate your diligence in answering that question. Are you aware, Minister, can you think of any other time that information was released this quickly as we've seen it released on this particular case?
Certainly, Mr. Gerritsen, not in the time that I've been minister, because I think we recognize, and my colleague Mark Miller said so publicly, we recognize the understandable questions that Canadians had when they learned following the RCMP news release of these arrests. I think it is reasonable for the government and for Canadians to ask, well, how could this sequence of events that we've laid out before the committee take place, and what can we learn from that sequence of events to ensure the very best measures are in place? So that's the work that's ongoing. But we thought it was important to lay that out for Canadians. But I hope people understood in my opening comments when I talked, when I said very clearly that in the month of June, when CSIS became aware of some of this concerning information, they immediately took all of the necessary measures to ensure that the threat was managed or mitigated. I may not be using the right technical term. The RCMP were involved as well. And then we saw the successful arrest on the 28th of July. These people remain in custody, in jail. Their bail was denied. And there will be a prosecution. So in our system, and you know this very well, Mr. Gerritsen, that should be the objective in terms of keeping Canadians safe. And I'm confident that this case, once the details come out, I hope in a trial, once a jury or a judge is able to evaluate the evidence, Canadians will understand perhaps how these cases can successfully be handled.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure that the two former Crown prosecutors that are sitting at this table would understand that very well.
I've been missing my time here. On y va maintenant, Monsieur Fortin. Monsieur Fortin, allez-y.
We'll now move over to Mr. Fortin. Mr. Fortin, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Minister, you said something came to our attention in June. According to the chronology, in June 2024, CSIS learned about the threat. However, the video that led to all of this was from 2015. So there was 9 years before the video that led to the arrest was filmed, and CSIS learned about a threat. Can you explain to me how this could be the case? How is it that our security services were unaware of this video before June of 2024? Mr. Fortin, it's an entirely reasonable question, and I understand why you are asking it. But just to be entirely clear, I asked Mr. Larkin why we are unable to comment on the supposed video. Mr. Larkin, can you please explain this context to Mr. Fortin?
Merci, Monsieur Ministre.
Thank you, Minister.
In addition to the emergence in the media of a video, it would be very difficult and irresponsible for me to speak specifically to the video, as it's we have an ongoing criminal prosecution, but we also have an active ongoing investigation. And so, Monsieur Fortin, it's very difficult to speak directly to any evidence or any information that may prejudice the criminal prosecution.
Thank you. I understand that we cannot talk about the video, so I won't talk about it. But I will ask you, were you only aware of the video in June 2024, or did the government learn about it earlier? Again, Mr. Fortin, I want to be very cautious. I can say to you, and I said in my opening remarks, that the moment that the government became aware of a threat, an elevated threat level, took place in June 2024. The details of who had access to what documents or what evidence. So it was really in June of 2024, Minister? The problem, Mr. Fortin, is that this is the precise sort of information which, as Mr. Larkin said, could end up in a criminal trial. That is why I'm being very cautious. I understand But the effectiveness of our security services is being questioned here. At any rate, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We go now to Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, I also want to just ask a few questions about that video of June of 2015, and I understand the limitations you have in answering specifics about it, but to Mr. Fortin's point, June of 2015, those were the final months of the previous Harper Conservative government, so it's over 9 years ago. It is a publicly acknowledged video, given that it was reported in global news. I guess what I want to know is, broadly speaking, when videos like this are released to the public through various outlets, Minister, can you talk a little bit about the procedures that are in place nowadays? Because I'm sure the biometrics technology is very different in 2024 compared to what it was in 2015, that allows analysis of these videos and without jeopardizing the current investigation or the case before the court. I guess what lessons can you publicly tell us that you've learned from this experience that you may be now applying to future analysis of videos of this nature?
Mr. McGregor, thank you for that very good question, but because it is very technical and we don't want to bump into what Deputy Commissioner Larkin said, I think Ted Gallivan from CBSA can answer specifically for you in terms of the timeline and perhaps other technologies. I want to give Ted a chance because you'll get a precise answer that won't somehow allow me to end up stepping into a criminal trial where I shouldn't. Ted?
So independent of the criminal investigation, the CBSA, subsequent to media reporting, went and obtained an instance of this video from the dark web. It's part of the review. We're asking ourselves, questions about the procedures. And so I think I can confirm through a review of the treatment of these individuals that video wasn't available to the CBSA and officials who were screening the individual. I can say that the preliminary indications were that video of the father was not available in that instance that we found in 2018 or 2021, that it was only made available more recently. We are trying to see if there are other instances of that video or if it could have been obtained in other ways. And we're also asking ourselves the question around the feasibility of finding a video like that if you don't know about it. And so I think I can confirm to the committee that the CBSA has an independent copy of that, and we're being very careful in what we say, that we're looking at in the context of this review that the minister mentioned. And preliminary indications by the CBSA are that they certainly weren't available in 2018 and 2021, and that's the purpose of the review, is to get to the bottom of those questions. Preliminary review wasn't available during the screening in 2018 or 2021. Serious questions about whether it was findable if you didn't know what you were looking for.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor.